a podcast anyway, right?
No, this is live stream. So,
Oh, okay.
good morning, everyone. This is Carl Dakin. This is the Successful Funding Show. And this is a relatively new program that I'm putting on LinkedIn Live. And so I'll walk you through some background and some basics. And while we're doing that, my guest, Arlen Myers, is working diligently to get his system to talk to this system and see how this all comes together. I would have to say this is episode number 6 of the show, and we have had connection difficulties with all shows so far. So we're just getting up to the normal level. There's Arlen, uh, and he has a large device between his camera and
There we go. Okay, now we're good to go. All right.
so background on this. My name's Carl Dakin. I'm the capital coach. I provide services, particularly to small businesses, either startups or companies leveling up, where they're looking to raise capital, and we try to figure out who their best investor candidates are, how to craft an offer, and pitch that in order to help them be successful in raising funding. I put together this show where my goal is to provide all kinds of information on the subject of funding. We're not limited just to small businesses. We're not limited just to um, different types of capital structures or anything else. This is kind of a free for all. And the style of this show is conversational, meaning that we're not here to pitch anything. We will talk about things we're doing. And yes, you are free to go out and buy anything we mention or go to anybody we talk about. But our goal here is simply to talk about the subject of today. And my guest is Arlen Myers, who is the founder of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs. And he will share some background and do all those kinds of things. So, uh, to begin with, Arlen, everything you just typed in the private chat is not going to show up
Oh,
on the chat.
where do I type it
I,
in the
I'll
chat?
I'll have to work with that. That's
All
an
right.
issue I'm still trying to get.
All right.
There were supposed to be different ways of doing this, but Arlen, start off. Just tell us about yourself. Tell us about how you came to create the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs.
Right.
And then as we go forward in the program, we'll talk back and forth with the audience who's listening in. We'll make comments or ask questions, and so we'll invite them into the conversation. We'll spend an hour very calmly talking about this topic. But as I was putting the show together this morning, I was reminded of when you invited me to help put together a pitch for soap down on Market Street in Denver, and we had a full studio, and they were doing all this cool CGI background and so forth.
Right.
And this is nowhere near that that level of sophistication. So we talk about LinkedIn Live as being a way to build your community, share your story with a low cost, low budget, low prep approach. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So Arlen, take it away.
All right. So thanks for inviting me, Carl. So I'll give you the short version. My first career, I'm an ear, nose, and throat facial plastic surgeon by training. I spent my first career as an academic surgeon at the University of Colorado. And I did what academic surgeons do for many, many years, teaching research, patient care, development, et cetera. And in the course of that career, I made several career pivots, and that resulted in what I'm doing now, which is I no longer see patients. I'm totally on the business side. And what I do are basically 3 things. Fundamentally, what I do is I help people get their ideas to patients, or people who are helping people getting ideas to patients. And I do that through education. I teach healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship in various places, mostly at the graduate level, medical school, health professional schools, health administration, that kind of stuff. I consult to companies, startups, scale ups, grown ups in any domain, whether it's drugs, devices, digital health, care delivery, whatever. And I'm the co founder, president, and CEO of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, which is a not for profit global ownership network. And our mission is to help our members get their ideas to patients. So basically, the problem that we're trying to solve is most white coats, engineers, scientists, doctors, whatever, think they have a good idea when in fact they don't. Secondly, even if they had a good idea, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And third, the educational and all the other things you need in the ecosystem presently don't exist or didn't, at least when we started this, which incidentally was in 2011. So that's what we're trying to solve. So obviously part of that is money. And that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, so as usual, Arlen, went through a list of major challenges to physicians in particular, but the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, there's now, you started it in Denver, I forget how many years ago, but a long time back, and now it's worldwide. So talk a little bit more about where the chapters are and what all the organization is doing.
Right. So we're a nonprofit, as I mentioned. We're an open innovation network, so anybody can join. You don't have to be a health professional, doctor, surgeon. As long as you have a dog in the hunt and you want to get something to a patient, you can be part of the organization. We're subscription based. We cost pretty cheap, $80 a year. If you're a student, a resident, or a trainee, we give you a discount. But fundamentally, what we do is we have an international network. I tell people we're a cross between Rotary and Match.com. We're a dating service. So essentially, if you have a question or you don't know what to do, we connect you or you use the network to connect you to somebody who does. We just had a conversation at a previous webinar I was on. The topic was artificial intelligence risk management. So the question is, can I get sued for using AI in the clinic? And that's what the whole thing was about. And we had a lawyer talking about, well, here's what you got to deal with and all that. So that's an example of how this works. So fundamentally, we, meaning the society, provide education and access to resources, networks, mentors, experience, peer support, and non-clinical career guidance. We have communities all over the world. We're represented in most major continents. Some places we're still working on, but it's been an interesting journey in terms of how to scale a virtual nonprofit medical society around the world.
Yeah, so I'm a member of the society, and I belong to the Colorado chapter, which is based here in Denver, that puts on monthly programs. And last month's program on Bitcoin kind of stirred my mind and possibly some of my statements. But the people in the room come from actually a wide variety of people. You'll have intellectual property specialists. You'll have people who understand every rule that the FDA ever came up with. People from the insurance industry who understand CPT codes. You'll have doctors who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, those who have become entrepreneurs, students from the university. It's a really great group of people. I haven't had a chance to be in any of the meetings of the other chapters around the world, but the conversations are very deep. They're very rich, and it gives us a chance to take a hack at the current problems that are out there. But I want to get back to a statement you made earlier. You made some comment about physicians maybe not being the most qualified to be an entrepreneur. Why don't you take that apart a little bit and explain
Right.
to me your viewpoint on
Well,
that?
it starts off with the myth that doctors are lousy business people. That's a myth. That's just absolutely positively not true, and we can kind of dissect that. The problem is if you tell someone, and we've experienced this lately, if you tell someone something long enough, they start believing it, and so that the more relevant problem is doctors actually believe they're lousy business people when in fact they're not. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not the least of which is that's not how you get selected to go to medical school. It's not how I got selected. So it's this perpetuating myth that's kind of stupid. And part of my mission in life is to dispel it. Um, so our, but that having been said, uh, in order to be a physician, in my view, now, first of all, entrepreneurship in what I'm talking about is not just creating a company. Entrepreneurship, in my view, is the pursuit of opportunity under uncertain conditions. But the main point is the goal is to create user defined value through the deployment of innovation using a viable business model. In the case of sick care, it's achieving the quintuple aim: quality, cost, access, experience, waste, and shareholder value. So it's different than a lot of other, well, obviously it's different than other industries. So what I'm talking about are entrepreneurial roles that healthcare professionals can assume: intrapreneurs, technopreneurs, medical practice entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, public health or public entrepreneurs, investors. There's lots of different ways to get involved in this. So that's basically what the society is trying to do, is to educate and give people the tools, knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies to accomplish these things. And that's the basic idea. The problem is there are very few medical schools that teach healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship in the medical school. And it's a different conversation about MD, MBA programs and why do you have to go to business school to learn this stuff? And do you even learn it if you spend $100,000 to go to Wharton? I mean, it's a whole conversation and I'm happy to have it. The bottom line is, I think if you're interested in, if you're a healthcare professional interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, save your money. Don't go to business school and insist that we teach it in medical school.
Well, and that's a point I did want to ask of you because I obviously have worked with you on the courses that are being taught at CU Health Sciences in the Bio-Entrepreneurship program. And I do my own instruction as well as guest lecturing at the universities across the state of Colorado and occasionally elsewhere. And it seems like is this big gap for the healthcare industry where it's kind of like views itself as over, by its side. It's like
Right.
it either doesn't understand how it fits into the rest of the world, or
Right.
there's this gap between the rest of the world and the healthcare industry.
Right.
And for doctors in particular, there doesn't seem to be any straight path or well beaten path for them to go into school and come out as a healthcare professional and a business person at the same time.
Right. And you could ask the question, well, why is that? I mean, if when I ask 100 doctors, if you know then what you know now, what should we have learned? Because I was one of them, what should we have learned in medical school? 99 times out of 100, they say the business of medicine. How do I bill for the person that I just saw? That kind of stuff. So you got to ask yourself, well, why don't they teach it then? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I could go through the whole list, but some of them, for example, the MD MBA program in most business schools are a cash cow, and at Colorado or any other place, there's turf wars. Who gets the money? Second, what business are we in? That's what the dean of the medical school asks. Are we in the business of teaching doctors the business of medicine, or are we in the business of teaching them how to be competent clinicians? Both. Why does it have to be one or the other? But there are all kinds of issues with, okay, now we're going to teach this in the medical school. What about the business school? And a final one really has to do with the resistance to change and what I call academia. It's just that the industry is so resistant to change. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I would say the final one really has to do with accreditation. There are certain things medical schools must do to get accredited and move on. And if a topic is not part of the accreditation process, they got a lot of other fish to fry. So, a short version, if it's not on the test, we're not going to teach it. The problem is the students say, but that's what I want to learn. So you have to sort of work through all those issues. And we are actually. I could give you chapter and verse about and show you the scars of how we've done that, but it is eminently doable. And the final point I would make is that the persona of incoming pre-meds and medical students aren't going to put up with this crap. They're just not. They're going to demand that we teach them what they need to know to be successful in a very highly competitive and very different medical environment than we had 40 years ago. It's just a different place. So I
Well,
think it's educational malpractice not teaching this stuff.
um, I think, you also look at the business schools today, and they have a tendency back to status quo, great momentum and repeating yesterday over and over and over again. They don't do a good job of teaching to specific industries. And I see this, the school, they basically give you a target, which is a large business. We don't see a lot of good programs on entrepreneurship. There are some out there. There are some that are, like you described, have been building over the last 10, 15 years, but they're few in comparison to the number of business degrees that are out there that are supposed to teach you how to run a business, but it's assuming that you come in as a mid-level manager, you go through corporate training for 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
and you may still not understand 90% of how the business works because you're inside of a large organization and not having to run the entire show. So I see, I'll say, opportunities uh,
Yeah.
for this. And I see this in a lot of industries. The healthcare is not just the only one
Right.
where it seems everybody's got their own turf. Um, what and then the other thing I see is, as you described it, the new students who are now, I will say, taking a second look at higher education, starting to ask themselves, should they put themselves into hock for the rest of their lives in hopes that a presidential pardon will get them off the hook on their student loans? Should they do that? And a lot of them are saying, well, if I really am going to make a choice that's career oriented as opposed to just getting a degree, then now they're looking at other things, other skills, the trades, other things along that line. They're becoming more of a, I would call it, a selective consumer. And I do think that's going to change how higher education is going to have to respond. If they want the students to be a customer, they're going to have to do a better job of delivering something that is career ready. It may not be quite job ready, but
Yeah.
as close as they can get.
Right. In startup language, the company has lost touch with its customers. And last night I was invited to speak at to 15 or 16 students who are in a BSBT program, a biological sciences and biotechnology program at Colorado. These are people in a professional science master's program, which is sort of an intermediary. It's like the business of biotech. It's not a PhD. It's not a. It's and in former times, about a third of the class they did it because they wanted to apply to medical school. It was a sort of solidify your resume and check off another box to maybe get into medical school. I was surprised actually that this time there were many fewer people doing that. Fewer people were interested in getting this to go to medical school. Most want to go into biotech, and that's why they were doing this. And there were some other people, but that was the basic thing. The second observation is when I talk to medical students, and I have a lot, uh, I talk to first year med students and I say, how many of you are interested in just seeing patients for the rest of your clinical career? 15%. And the number is dropping. So the point is, they want to do other stuff. They want to do, they want to change the world. They want to create companies. They want to do more stuff. They want to be social entrepreneurs, but we're not teaching them how to do it. And finally, if, there's a lot of talk about value-based care. I guess noise is a better descriptor than or noun than talk. But um, my argument is, so let me get this straight. You're going to pay me to deliver value, but you're not going to teach me how to do it. So to me, that's like cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, that's like moral hazard. That's like you name the, what burnout, you name the descriptor. I just don't think that's right. So that's
Well,
another reason why we're doing this.
to me, that's a lot of the startup entrepreneurial programs fall in that category.
Yeah,
There's it's you see the media, you see governments, economic developers all say we need more small businesses, we need more entrepreneurs, and so
right,
forth. And they act like you flip a switch and somebody makes a
right,
career choice to go out and be an entrepreneur, and then that's why we see a high fallout rate, where you see startups with 60, 70, 80, 90% failure rates, partly because they're not well prepared, partly because they don't have the mindset to be an entrepreneur, and deal
right.
with it. And yes, cruel and unusual punishment seems like the right
Yeah.
label to stick on
And
some of these
and
programs.
factually, the entrepreneurship rate, however you describe that, it's usually like how many companies have been in exist have been created within the last year, which is really not a very good, but it is what it is. And that
Well,
number has actually been dropping. So entrepreneurship in the United States is actually dropping despite all the noise. And secondly, the argument is always entrepreneurship is the engine of productivity and workforce development. It isn't. It really isn't. I mean, if you look at how many employees do these new businesses actually pay, let alone have on the roll, it's not going to get us there. So I just think there's a lot of myth and there's a lot of propaganda that's going around that just isn't factual, let alone in sick care, like 95% of companies fail. So what's wrong with that?
well, you started off by saying that there's a myth that doctors are not good business people, and I myself battle with myths in the capital industry all the time, where the assumption is anybody who has a checkbook is an investor candidate, and if you want to raise money, the best way to do that is go to an angel pitch competition where it's a winner take all approach, and one person may or may not walk out of the room with a check. But we've had a good evening. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for putting all your pitches on the stage.
Right.
I want to take a moment here to welcome the audience that's listening. Harvey is here. Harvey is one of my advisors on helping me put together my LinkedIn live show. He actually has his own show immediately after today's show where he is putting on the franchise show, and he is diving deep into franchising. And that actually may be a question I'll ask you in a moment about franchising doctors and so forth.
Right.
I also
Yeah,
see that,
yeah, Emiliano has a question.
yeah, well, we try to take some questions. Emiliano and I know each other well enough that if I ignore his question, I'll hear about it later.
Oh, I
So
see.
the Emiliano is with us today. He and I are working together with artificial intelligence and avatars as I call it a short form of education, where I only want to know enough to answer one question at a time. I don't want to go to a semester long course 80% of what they taught me, question whether any of it was valuable, and then miss the other 90% because I got my law degree a long, long time ago in a land far away. And when I got out, it seemed like nothing I'd learned in law school had any real merit at all. Everything I needed to know, which is all about the business aspects of how do you charge a client? What does it mean by billable time? All these other factors were just completely not there. And we had to figure it out for ourselves.
Right.
And even the continuing legal education programs put on by the bar
Right.
generally dealt with issues of law, black and white letter law. Is this true or not true under
Right.
these factual circumstances? It's not the practice of law, that's just law. So the practice of medicine, I agree, needs to include teaching them how to run a business, even if they're not the business manager, they at least have to know how the business operates and how they contribute as a part of a team to an operational healthcare type of business activity. So, what would you recommend to a person today who is thinking about starting a business in the healthcare industry, who might be a doc, who might be a nurse, who might be a EMT or something like that? What
Right.
would be your first thoughts on that, Arlen?
So my thoughts are that there's three things. Well, there are many, many steps to career planning and figuring out where these career transitions happen and exit ramps and what you do and all that. But when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship, I tell people a couple things. One is um, you really have to start off with a self-assessment. Are you built to do this? And what that means is you have to look at three basic things. And you never tell people to do more than three things. A, because they can't remember more than three things. B, because it's kind of like this Judeo Christian thing, like three is a number we're all familiar with. And C, a third of the people aren't listening to you at any time. So you have to sort of tell it over and over again. So here are the three things. One, you're going to need means, mindset, and motivation. The most important thing is mindset. How do you see the world, and how do you put things together? And probably the most important skill set and competency is being an observer, experimenter, somebody that's constantly asking questions, asking what if. But probably the biggest thing is associating. And what that means is connecting dots. And Steve Jobs used to say, innovation's about connecting dots. Well, there's a lot of dots out there. And I'm talking about outside of healthcare, sick care, technology, economics, global trends, demographics, all the stuff. How does that inform your thinking about what you're trying to do? If you're not good at connecting dots, you might want to rethink doing innovation and entrepreneurship. The second is, so that's mindset. Means just that. How much runway do you have to do this? You're $260,000 in debt as a medical student. You're thinking of spending $100,000 at Wharton next year. Where are you going to get the money to do this? And all the other stuff that goes into it, credit cards, books, living, whatever. Now, in reference to the previous question, how come they don't have to pay to get educated in Canada? Somebody pays for it. I guarantee you, somebody pays for that. There's no free lunch. But the point is that in the United States, the short answer is because we don't value free education, just like we don't value a whole lot of other things. You can agree with that or disagree with it. The fact of the matter is, in the news the last couple of days, there was just an announcement that the Montefiore Medical School was given $1 billion grant by some generous donor so that nobody ever would have to pay tuition to go to Montefiore ever again. They're not the first. There have been several other medical schools that have said the same thing. And you may say, gee, that's a terrific idea. But if you think about it, is it really a terrific idea to just let anybody go to medical school? Not anybody. The people who go to medical school not pay for it. Is that a good idea? My mindset, people don't value what they don't pay for. So that's that argument. But you could say, yeah, but what about the physician shortage? And people aren't going into medicine because of the debt. That's not true. The number of people applying to medical school is the largest it's ever been. Last year, it's trickled down a little bit and flattened out, but more and more people are applying to medical school, despite the fact, and you could use the student loan argument, like, of course they'd go to school if the government, the citizens, are going to give them the money to go there and then forgive the loan. What's not to like? So there's all kinds of arguments about this is good news, bad news. Fundamentally, the answer to my Emiliano's question is how people treat such things as higher ed and sick care is a reflection of their values, of the country's values. The United States, simply, we do not value certain things. We value other things. We value suspicion of central government. We value the myth of the meritocracy. We value you work hard and you're going to do okay. That's not true, but we still value it. So that's my answer to why you can do. And there's a lot of places in the world where education is so-called free.
Well, and again, parallels there. I have my opinions about all the free stuff that is given to someone who wants to start up their own business. And they kind of create a false sense of security. Oh, I'm going to get a grant. I'm going to get some free space in an incubator. I'm going to get all these different things in order for me to be a successful small business person. And it creates a sense of entitlement is the term I use and associate with this type of thing. And it sets the table for massive failure. And I've seen it happen time and time again where somebody will come and they'll say, well, hey, I want some help with this. And I go, well, here's my fee, it
Right.
pays for the lights and all this kind of stuff,
Right.
some basic things like that. And they're going, but don't I get this for free? And your response is technically, as you stated it, nothing's free. The question is who's paying the bills. And if the bills are paid by the government, that means you're paying it out of your taxes, and that means that they decided it's better to send someone to med school who may or may not graduate as opposed to fixing the street in front of your house. The government made a choice on where they're going to allocate their money. And here in the United States, we're still suffering under the delusion that the government has an unending, endless source of funding,
Right.
which is why we have inflation today. But that's a topic that we'll say for somebody who's an expert on inflation. All I have are opinions, and
Right.
most of those are probably going to provoke something. But I do think that simply putting somebody through school for free, and there's different ways people can get scholarships, and it gets very convoluted to go through the path. But at some point, you have to teach them the real things. You have to teach them the things that allow them to succeed. And starting the game by giving stuff away, I think upsets the mindset. It's contrary to the kind of person that needs to be looking at this.
Yeah.
And I particularly like your description of connecting the dots and of entrepreneurs. One of the biggest challenges you have as an entrepreneur is you're trying to provide a product or service to your customer that's going to help them out. And when you come up with the feature set for your product or service, you could be wrong. In fact, you could be so wrong that you're rapidly out of business. But you have to constantly think, put yourself in the shoes of your customer. You have to be thinking through this. And in this country, where I see we're still seeing this shift away from, I believe, Arlen, you call it Western practice, which is to respond to an ailment rather than preventative care, which could be something that would have stopped the ailment to happening to begin with. And I think this is where we see more opportunities for people to enter into new businesses today.
Yeah, actually, I call it sick care instead of health care. And for the audience, you may not understand, maybe you don't appreciate, we spend $4.5 trillion in the United States on a health spend, 4.5 trillion with a T, more than any other industrialized country in the world. We don't get very good outputs. And my argument is, so don't call it a healthcare system. It's a sick care system, because 96% of that money that we, the taxpayers, pay is for sick care, taking care of sick people. It's not about preventive medicine. It's not about chronic care. It's not about public health infrastructure. It's about taking care of sick people. Now, one of the visions and one of the missions of what we're trying to do is to transform sick care into healthcare. But that's another conversation. But that's where we are now. So I call it sick care.
Yeah. So moving to some of the core problems that starting a business today, particularly in healthcare, particularly if you have to pay back a massive student loan, that's I can't. I have a hard time wrapping my mind around how much it costs to get a degree in healthcare today, and a harder time understanding how you're going to pay that back. And so I kind of have two questions here. One is, I know the stats are that we're seeing this shift from independent physicians working for themselves, in their own practices, clinics,
Right.
to physicians now working for big organizations and so forth.
Right.
And to me, this is also disruptive to what we're talking about on the difference between healthcare and sick care.
Well, the corporatization of medicine is a pretty large topic. Let me just try to give you some broad overview. First of all, healthcare policy reform is something that's been referred to in the United States as the 100 Years' War. Uh, Reforming healthcare policy in the United States started roughly during Teddy Roosevelt's time in the progressive era around the mid to early 1900s, 1912, 1915. And ever since then, so it went from the dog, the buggy whip and the doctor showing up and you give him a chicken to take care of you to where we are now. And that has spanned over 100 years. It's actually 109 years war, but that doesn't have the same ring as the 100 years war. So that's what we call it. Secondly, it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that the number of physicians now, the active number of the number of active physicians in the United States, MDDOs, this does not include advanced practice professionals, another topic, is slightly over 1 million. And the argument goes that we're going to have a doctor shortage. Well, the fact of the matter is the number of practicing physicians per capita in the United States has risen. So we don't have a doctor shortage. We have a generalist specialist misalignment, and we have a geographic misalignment, and we have an employment misalignment. And that gets to 65% of roughly, of practicing physicians in the United States work for the man. Now, when I say the man, I don't want to be sexist, so it could be a woman, but they work for the man, capital M. So I call them the docs in the gray flannel suits. Like IBM, you wear a blue suit and a white shirt and a red tie, and you get on the train and you go to New York. That's what people do. So is that a problem? Well, and why does it happen? It happens because medical students are risk averse and they're up to their eyeballs in debt, and they just want a secure paycheck. And they want work-life balance. And they want this, and that. They're not going to get the ping pong table, maybe, but they want work-life balance and they want all these other things. And they're risk averse, and they simply do not know how to run a successful private practice for the reasons that we've just explained. So it doesn't come as any surprise. And oh, by the way, there's an oligopoly of health providers through consolidation, which factually increases the cost of care and actually limits access and is less safe. And I'm not making this up. I mean, the folks that study this up, the yin yang, are telling us this stuff. So there are issues, and then there's private equity, and that's a whole nother conversation. So if you go see a doctor, the likelihood is that they're working for the man. And, oh, by the way, they have a conflict of interest because the man is telling them what to do, how many patients to see, how to do it, what you can and can't treat. Are you in a red state or a blue state? Can you do this? Can you do that? What kind of hospital system are you in? If you're in a Catholic hospital system, you can't do this. If you're at the VA, you can't do that. If you're in the Indian Health Service, and you can't do this. So the average patient doesn't understand. I'm not blaming average patients. I'm just simply saying the system is so screwed up and complicated, it's almost impossible for anybody to really understand what's going on, let alone pricing and how much you're being charged.
Yeah, I joke about the capital industry being such a mess that no one could intentionally have designed it to be this bad. That it takes decades of time of bad policy, bad decision making,
right.
bad markets to make it as weird
Well,
and strange as it is.
and that goes
It,
back to the question of how did we get here? What happened? Where was Marcus Welby? Like, how come we're not, why aren't, how did we wind up this way? Well, I think it's a combination of obviously politics, of an accident of history, because all of this insurance stuff started in the 1940s as part of the Second World War and wage price controls. So they couldn't give people money, so they gave them benefits, and that's basically how insurance started. Capitalism and the holy dollar, drove consolidation and the corporatization, financialization of medicine, and the values. As I said before, at this present moment in time, Americans don't value healthcare as something that everybody should have. It's not a
so
right;
Emiliano,
it's a privilege.
yeah, Emiliano has raised the question. So how do you shift value? This is, uh, I get up in the morning, I go, I want to change the capital industry, and
Right,
then I remember I'm just me.
right,
I don't
right,
have billions of dollars, and I
right.
don't show up on TV. So what would you recommend? Apparently, it's going to have to be a grassroots effort of some kind.
Well, my view of that is that. Uh, so the short answer is you vote. So what do I mean by that? I mean that uh, that the rules. So as people say to me, "What's the one thing you would do to make this right?" And the one thing I would do if I were king of the United States is change the rules, because rules create ecosystems, and ecosystems create business models, and business models are either for innovation and equity or they're not. So depending on the rules, so then you think backwards, okay, what rules do we need to change? Well, there's like a million of them.
Yes.
So, and who makes the rules? The people that we elect, and other, fifth column and citizen efforts. So it's not a single bullet, but if you're asking me what to do, vote. I'm not telling
Well,
you to vote for. I'm just saying, depending on what you want, vote.
yeah, so I will add a caveat, or I think it might be a mathematical corollary to that statement. I have helped put together legislation here in the state of Colorado and worked with people who have moved legislation through the federal system. And one of the things that I learned, I will say slowly, is that the representative that you vote for is not a genius. They do not know everything. They do not have access to all the information in the world. And that's why you have an opportunity as a citizen to aid them in their understanding. And you can do this by personal visits. You can work through a trade association. Some of these even have lobbyists to help gain, the attention of the person you're talking to. But don't assume that your elected official understands anything we just said in this conversation so far today. They may have some awareness of it. They may have been briefed by people because they have massive staffs to do that kind of a thing. But citizens should follow their votes with direct contact engagement with their elected officials and do what they can to help them understand the issues. And then you can voice your opinion for or against whatever you think it needs to be. But before we run out of time today, um, one of the things I want to, you mentioned private equity. So assuming that we have a situation where somebody wants to start up a healthcare business, where's private equity going to play a role in that from your perspective?
Well, there's two perspectives to private equity. Let's just, like with everything. On the one hand, the promise of private equity, I'm referring specifically to sick care. The promise of private equity is that we can fix things. Let me just remind you that, again, $4.5 trillion spent on sick care. The experts, unquote, feel and tell us that about 25 to 30% of that is waste. And there's a whole bunch of reasons what that means. But we're talking about $1 trillion of waste in the system. So their argument is we can get rid of the waste. We can make sick care more efficient and effective, and we can come in and fix it up and fix and flip and sell it, for a profit. But we are adding societal value because we're eliminating the waste and making people do better. Cheaper, better, faster, smarter. You can't argue with that if you do it. I mean, who doesn't want to eliminate the waste? The counter argument is that, well, things haven't really worked out so well in private equity. And by that, I mean that I'm familiar with, and in fact, have family members who's a doctor, that his practice was bought out by private equity, and he is not happy. So what they do, what happens is they make you an offer you can't refuse. You're in all this debt. You're looking at the environment and saying, I can't compete with the big guys. So I need to sell out to somebody. They're going to pay me a reasonable amount of money for my practice. It's probably not as much as I want, but at least I'm going to cash out because I'm afraid. It's basically about fear. And then I'm going to work for them. But the problem is they will tell you what to do, how many patients to see, how long you need to see them, what procedures you need to do. So it ratchets, it trickles down, and it makes doctors unhappy. The typical example is emergency medicine. And many, many more specialties, including my own, ear, nose, and throat surgery, are coming onto the radar of private equity groups for the reasons that I mentioned. So I'm not telling folks whether you sell your practice or not. I think Carl and people like him, their benefit is if you are considering selling your practice to private equity, here's what you need to think about. Here's how you get the best price. Here's what you're getting yourself into. Here are the non-compete issues. What's going to happen down the road if I die, or all of the issues that go into that. So it's another part of healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship training and how to practice the business of medicine. You may like it, you may dislike it, but if you're flat out ignorant about it, you're dead in the water. You can't make a rational decision. It becomes an emotional decision, and that causes even more problems.
Yeah, I mean, all decisions ultimately are emotional, but it's
Right.
always good to have them on like icing on the cake of solid foundational good information. Uh, and it's interesting because yeah, here you have a choice of somebody buying your practice, referred to as private equity, and yet at the same time, it's going to be no different than working for the man with a capital M,
Right.
because in both cases you have somebody who's now in an oversight capacity, in a managerial
Right.
position, is going to tell you how to run your business because they want to maximize the dollars of that business. And this both challenges the Hippocratic oath of do no harm and
Right.
all the good things that
And if you
doctors are supposed to do.
and this gets back to the other voting point. So this is a good example. So many states are now and the FTC are now pushing back against consolidation in the healthcare industry and private equity owning hospital practices or physician practices. The so-called Corporate Practice of Medicine Acts in various states that prohibit corporations from actually, quote, taking care of patients. They do the work around. There's various other ways to do it. But there's legislation in various states pushing back against private equity, as well as, and you're seeing this recently, many, many large hospital systems thought they could get away with it, but not anymore. It's like Kroger Albertsons. You can't
Yes.
do this. It's going to restrict competition. Prices are going to go up. You're going to screw up a sick care system worse than it's already screwed up. And we don't want you to do that. There are certain politicians that think that's a good idea. There are other politicians who say that's a bad idea. There are others that are clueless. So you have to figure out which one is on your side and you vote for them.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The only thing that you're guaranteed by the Constitution is the ability to cast a vote. And
And
it's
that's debatable these days. Like some
well,
folks would argue with you, but that's basically true. Yeah.
well, here in Colorado, not to point out any particular party, but when they dictate to you that you don't need a primary anymore, or you're not allowed to vote in a primary, or
Right.
any number of other things that basically tell you don't need to vote anymore because we're
Yeah.
going to tell you who's already the go-to person. It does seem like our democracy is going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But I want to stay on equity for, and funding for just a few more minutes here. But if I'm starting a practice today and
Right.
I'm looking for funding, where would you normally start your search? Where would you go and say, are you going to go to a local angel club, or are you going to go to the doctors convention where everybody thinks doctors write checks to start up businesses, or where would you go?
Are you talking about starting a clinical practice, or are you talking about starting a business?
I'm talking about starting any kind of healthcare business. It could be a clinical practice. It could
Well,
be.
they're very different scenarios. So, I mean, again, back to the definition. Medical practice entrepreneurship, that is private practice, which I did for many, many years. It's a form, in my opinion, of entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, we refer to it as medical practice management. And I'm not discounting the need for operations management, internal financial controls, HR, product development, you name it. And I did that. And I screwed it up a lot because I didn't know anything about it. Somebody stole money from me. They embezzled money from my private practice. So I'm pretty sensitive to this issue. I still want to kill this person. But if you're talking about a business that is spinning out a product that has nothing, I mean, it's a gadget or it's a whatever, that's different. So in the former, it's actually not that difficult. I mean, people are willing, banks and various funding agencies are willing to give you money to start a private practice. But again, that depends on a lot of factors, and the environment has changed. So because private practice is shrinking, you have to have like a pretty good story for somebody to lend you the money, which is very different than what it used to be when I was in practice a gazillion years ago. Now, when it comes to finding money to start your scale up, your startup, that's a whole different conversation. And you and I have had this till the cows come home. So there's many, many different ways. But the bottom line to me is you have to do your homework. You have to essentially convince the person to know, like, and trust you with $2 million that you're asking them for. That means you have to do a lot of homework. You have to have a reasonable business model. I mean, fundamentally, they're going to want to know, why should I give you my money, and can I trust you, and how much am I going to get back, and when? Those are the questions. So what? Who cares? How much? Who pays? That's what you need to know. So you tell me the answers to that question, and then we can have a conversation.
Right. I mean, at that point, a healthcare business, a service business is no different than any other business. It's the fundamentals of economic sustainability. You're looking at the amount of profit that you may earn. You're looking to the management team as being a viable source of different kinds of things to go that direction. And if you can't satisfy all those, then in the competitive world for funding today, you're going to lose out because the money's going to go elsewhere.
Right. And Janice has made a comment, and that is, the vast majority of entrepreneurs, as shrinking as they may be, fund their company with credit cards. The vast majority of people, they bootstrap. An infinitely small number of people have anything to do with angels, certainly with VCs. I mean, getting money from a VC is like playing high school basketball and thinking you're going to be in the NBA. Actually, I think the numbers are worse. It's
Yeah.
infinitely small. So I don't, I mean, to talk about VCs for a startup is really, I mean, you're not even going to be close. So you have to figure out other ways to do this way upstream. And a lot of it comes from fools, family, and friends. It comes from credit cards. It comes from a whole bunch of non-equity diluting sources that we can go into. But the bottom line is they are available, and particularly in Colorado, actually, proof of concept funds, advanced acceleration grants, SBIR, the number goes on and on and on. So you just have to do your homework and understand, follow the money. You have to figure out, where is the money and how can I get it? But you're not going to get it from angels or A rounds or any of that stuff. That's just so small.
Well, and it's Part of the situation there that I work with is I have to look at how large of a profit margin the business is going to earn. And service businesses almost always are much, much lower because you have so much higher cost relative
Right.
to materials versus services within the organization that they don't make the
Right.
best investment vehicle for an angel to put their money into. And as you described it, Arlen, the venture capitalists who are looking for an even higher breakout unicorn type of rate of return,
Right.
they'll never fit in that category.
And most of
We've
the
seen,
money is going into AI now anyway. So there's all this, it's like a non-AI desert.
right. Yeah. um, and this is the ebb and flow of the capital industry where somebody puts money into it, then everybody else decided that they should do it too for reasons they can't explain. And then the money follows it until all the lemmings go off the cliff and we switch our
Yeah.
focus to yet another shiny
Right.
object and go put our money there.
The other thing that I see is people say, well, here's my business model. And I say, well, who's the customer? Well, it's patients. Like it's a B2C model. In the US sick care system, if you are expecting patients to buy stuff from you, forget it. It's very, very difficult to create a business that is B2C. So that is B to customer, in this case, the
Right.
patient. Um, so what people are doing basically are they're doing B2B models. They're saying, well, I'm going to sell it to the hospital. I'm going to sell it to self-insured employers. I'm going to sell it to Google. I'm going to sell it to one of those things. It's really hard to do a B to patient business and sustain it for the reasons that you mentioned. There's just too much. It's hard to scale and it's just too costly. And
Yeah, I
the
mean,
customer acquisition cost is very high.
right, you spend all the time to get one customer who makes a purchase that won't basically pay for the cost of acquiring the customer.
Yeah,
And so I'm working with some businesses who are trying to go B2C, but they're finding that it's easier, better, more profitable for them to sell to a clinician who then either upsells it or sells through their organization. And
right,
because they're getting one customer means all the clients and patients of that clinician are
right,
all sold in a single sale. And that provides them an opportunity to grow, but it's very difficult. But there does seem to be a trend of people, segment of the population who are trying to take more control of their healthcare. They haven't, in effect, outsourced it entirely to the doctor, or they don't necessarily believe what the doctor tells them all the time.
right,
Um, so we're seeing a lot of different interests there. Then we all have the homeopathic market and that whole supplemental market, which is yet another thing for another day. But Arlen, I want to thank you for being my guest on today's show, and I want to thank the audience for listening in today and for your questions and comments because these are opportunities to get some of these topics in the public out in where everybody can see them.
right,
One of the benefits of doing a LinkedIn Live show like this is you get to interact with the people in the show. One of the other benefits is that it's recorded to LinkedIn Live and it'll be there forever, long after I'm gone and buried.
right,
So, if anybody feels a compelling need to go back and watch a
right.
video for hours on end, we'll have that opportunity for them.
And one
Uh,
final pitch is that, the pundits are saying that the presidential election, I don't care who you want to vote for, will depend on the uncommitted. The right's got the right, the left's got the left, but the decision's made by the middle. And 40 something percent of people who are registered to vote don't show up. So, and that, Bush Gore was settled by 567 votes in Florida. So if you don't think your vote counts, you're wrong. So just show up. That's
I
my
can't agree
pitch.
more. No, we're here to talk about healthcare and funding, and that probably the most important investment decision you can make today is to go to the ballot box. So, uh, thank you for that, and thank you, Aaron, for being with us, and thanks to our audience. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.